Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, January 14th, 2021 meeting of the Northampton School Committee. My name is David Narkowitz. I'm the mayor and the chair of the school committee. This meeting is being held as an online Zoom meeting pursuant to Governor Baker's emergency order modifying the state's open meeting law. And this meeting is being both audio and video recorded and is also being broadcast on Northampton Open Media. So I'll begin the meeting by asking the clerk to take the roll call of the school committee, please.
Sorry about that. Mayor Narkowitz.
Present.
Member Busansky.
Present.
Member Fallon. I don't think I saw her. Member Seraphy Cox. Member Condon.
Present.
Member Levy.
Present.
Member Kaufman.
Present.
Member Goldman.
Present.
Member Voss.
Present.
And Member Gold.
Present.
Your Honor, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. So as is our custom, I see Member Fallon coming in right now. So as is our custom, we will begin with a public comment period at the beginning of the meeting. I would ask if there's anyone here who is on the meeting who wishes to offer public comments. We allow up to 3 minutes. I would ask you to raise your hand if you wish to speak in public comment using the raise hand feature. If you're calling in on a phone, you would have to use the star keys, *6 to raise your hand. And I would ask everyone else who is in the meeting to just please mute yourselves so that those who are participating in the meeting are heard. Is there anyone who wishes to offer public comment this evening? Again, asking folks to raise their hand. Okay, well, I guess going once, going twice. Does not appear that there are folks here who wish to offer public comments. So we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is announcements. Are there any announcements from members of the school committee this evening? Okay. I don't see any announcements, so we'll move. Oh,
Mayor.
Member Fallon. Sorry.
Thanks. I just wanted to give a quick update. As your legislative liaison, I attended a webinar on the Student Opportunity Act. As we enter budget season, I was concerned about what's going to happen as far as the implementation of the Student Opportunity Act. And so I went to a webinar hosted by Colin Jones, the senior policy analyst at the Mass Budget and Policy Center. And it sounds like the 3 primary areas of concern are: one, the fact that there isn't as much revenue as we would hope for, and the question of whether they will be implementing the Student Opportunity Act fully this budget year. There is a risk, if it's not, that then, over the 7 years of implementation, we wouldn't reach that 1.58 billion that was promised. The second area of concern was that a lot of the Student Opportunity Act was focused or based on head counts, and our census was down statewide by 4% or 37,000 students. And then the third area of concern is that money was targeted and tied to the low income portion of the census and head count, and that portion of the head count statewide was down 10%. And so those were the 3 areas of concern that they were really focused on. And so the obvious, areas for advocacy for us would be to push for full implementation this budget year, and to ask that they use either historic data or at least factor in the loss in enrollment that we've experienced due to COVID. I have reached out and had an exchange with Senator Comerford's office, and she did say that it would be helpful if we maybe presented a resolution, and I will be reaching out to Representative Sabadosa's office as well. So that's all I've got for now, but I would expect by next month that I'll have a resolution or something for us all to vote on.
Thank you. Are there any other announcements from members of the school committee? Sorry, I think somehow the software changed and the hand is no longer blue. It's like lighter colored now, so I couldn't actually see it. So I got rid of the ubiquitous blue hand. Okay, so if there are no other announcements, we'll move into the item 4 on the agenda, which is the recommended actions or our consent agenda. And we have a group of minutes for approval this evening. We have the school committee minutes of September 10th, 2020, October 8th, 2020, November 12th, 2020, the student advisory council minutes of December 10th, 2020, and then the school committee minutes of December 10th, 2020. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda, and I'd also like to ask to have one set of minutes removed from the consent agenda.
Okay, certainly. Which one would that be?
December 10th.
December 10th.
School committee minutes.
Okay.
Committee minutes.
So,
Second.
okay, so there's a motion made and seconded to vote on the consent agenda, except for the December 10th, 2020 minutes, which we'll take up after. And I will ask the clerk to call the roll. Those in favor of approving the consent agenda would vote aye.
Member Busanski,
Aye.
Member Fallon,
Yes.
Member Seraphy Cox,
Yes.
Member Condon,
Yes.
Member Levy. I think you're
Yes.
mute.
Can you hear me?
I gotcha. Member Kaufman,
Aye.
Member Goldman,
Yes.
Member Voss,
Yes.
Member Gold,
Yes.
Mayor Narcoitz.
Yes.
The vote is 10 in favor.
Okay, so the consent agenda is approved. So now we will take up the issue of the school committee minutes of December 10th, 2020. And Member Busanski, do you want to make a motion with any edits that you wanted to offer?
Well, I don't have specific edits at this time, but I do have concerns. So maybe it'd be best to either I can talk about them now, or I could talk to Annie about them later and try and come back next month with another set of minutes, but whatever you prefer. I don't have specific edits at this time.
Do you
Okay,
want to talk with me tomorrow about it?
Yeah.
so maybe the better motion would be to postpone consideration of these minutes until the next meeting?
That would be great.
Okay, so is there a second on that motion?
Second.
Okay, so the motion is to postpone consideration of these minutes until our next meeting. And I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Member Fallon,
Yes.
Member Seraphy Cox,
Yes.
Member Condon,
Yes.
Member Levy,
Yes.
Member Kaufman,
Yes.
Member Goldman,
Yes.
Member Voss,
Yes.
Member Gold,
Yes.
Mayor Narcoitz,
Yes.
and Member Busanski.
Yes.
The vote is 10 in favor.
Okay, so Those minutes will be moved to our next meeting, and folks who want to give feedback on them can do that in the intervening time. Next item B under recommended actions is a budget transfer. This is a transfer from IT Pathways for DESI account and reclassification, $18,000. And I would entertain a motion for discussion, and then we can have the business administrator give anyone an explanation. Is there a motion?
Motion for discussion?
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Cami, did you want to?
Sure. So it's only a matter of the account number. I have to put it by what DESI categorizes it at, and it's still in the old number format. So it's changing account numbers is the only thing this is doing.
Okay. So it's not new money or money that's being moved. It's just.
We're not changing positions, nothing. It's just the account number is changing to reflect a correct DESI account categorization.
Okay. Are there any follow-up questions based on that explanation? Hearing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Member Seraphy Cox,
Yes.
Member Condon,
Yes.
Member Levy,
Yes.
Member Kaufman,
Yes.
Member Goldman,
Yes.
Member Voss,
Yes.
Member Gold,
Yes.
Mayor Narcoitz,
Yes.
Member Busansky,
Yes.
Member Fallon.
Yes.
The vote is 10 in favor.
Okay, the motion carries. The next item C, is donations. And we have the donation parent of an 8th grader, $3,000 to $4,000 for robotics equipment to help restart the after-school robotics program. I would entertain a motion on this, and we can obviously get more explanation. Is there a motion to accept this gift?
So moved.
Motion to accept the gift.
Okay.
Second.
Sorry, Emily.
So motion has been made and seconded. Cami, did you have any background information, or is it as it sounds?
It's pretty much as it sounds. The range is because they're actually giving us equipment, so they're estimating the value of it.
Okay.
It's not actually a check for a certain dollar amount.
Okay.
That's why there's a range.
Okay. All right. So any further questions on this gift? Okay. So all those in favor would vote aye. So we'll have the clerk call the roll.
Member Condon,
Aye.
Member Levy,
Yes.
Member Kaufman,
Yes.
Member Goldman,
Yes.
Member Voss,
Yes.
Member Gold,
Yes.
Mayor Narcoitz,
Yes.
Member Busansky,
Yes.
Member Fallon,
Yes.
and Member Seraphy Cox.
Yes.
The vote is 10 in favor.
Okay, so now we'll move into item 5 on our agenda, which is reports and recommendations. And the first report this evening is a report from our student representatives. And I believe we have Tally Serlin and Megan O'Connor here with us this evening. So I'll turn the floor over to the two of you and to decide how you want to go ahead and deliver your report.
Hello, to anyone who doesn't know us, we're the high school representatives from the Student Union. I'm Tolly.
And I'm Megan.
We're going to give a short presentation updating everyone on what's going on at NHS. Despite coronavirus and virtual schooling, students are finding creative ways to get involved in school activities.
Although sports have been canceled in order to keep the community safe, students have been getting involved in after-school activities by joining a variety of clubs that have been happening virtually. The NHS Key Club has conducted numerous socially distanced community service projects, including a styrofoam and trash pickup, delivering sandwiches to the Cathedral in the Night Church in Northampton, joining the tutoring group at NHS to provide distance tutoring to students in the community, and of course, ringing bells for the Salvation Army. Many other NHS clubs have found ways to continue on during the pandemic, including the NHS Art Club, the Environmental Club, Best Buddies, and more. And we are excited to tell you that 3 new clubs have been started during this crazy year. The first is Minds Matter, a club where students discuss mental health and ways to cope with stress, which has been a great resource for students, especially during the pandemic. The second is NHS Thrift Club, that is in the process of being started right now and is centered around finding affordable and sustainable ways to create fashion. And the third is a new club, a book club that has been meeting virtually and just finished reading the book Strangers on a Train. Despite the challenges created by the pandemic, as a member of the Northamptons myself, I am very happy to announce that the singing groups at NHS have found ways to keep creating music. The Northamptons actually last night just had an album sneak peek with friends and family, and our album will be released early in February, and we're also very excited to be featured in the virtual Silver Chord Bowl in February. Chorus has been creating an album, and Chamber Choir, which starts class second semester, will also be creating an album for the end of the year.
Students have also been involved in activities created by the student governments. Our current freshmen, class of 2024, will be having a clothing drive this Sunday. They are collecting used hats, gloves, and coats to donate to Craig's Doors, a homeless shelter in Amherst. If you have any of these items and you want to donate, you can drop them off at Lilly Library in Florence this Sunday from 12 to 3. The class of 2023, our sophomores, recently held a bingo night. It was a great way for their grade to spend time together, albeit online. Me and Megan's grade, class of 2022, held a design a logo contest. There were 2 winning pieces. One is featured on a t-shirt, the other on sweatpants. Both articles can be bought by the students and the proceeds will go to the student government. The seniors recently had a socially distanced scavenger hunt and they are finishing up their college applications. The high school is currently finishing the first semester of the year and also the first semester that the high school implemented a policy of standard-based grading. The student union is working with the administration to further improve the new grading system.
Thank you all so much for listening. We're happy to answer any questions you might still have about what's going on at the high school.
Thank you both. Thank you for that well-organized report. Is there any questions from members of the school committee about the report from our student representatives? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Member Seraphy Cox.
I just wasn't at the previous meeting when we had the fuller discussion, so I wanted to take this opportunity to welcome you both to the school committee meetings and thank you for your service to your fellow students.
Oh, thank you so much. We're so excited to be here.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay. Any other questions from school committee? Okay. Hearing none, thank you both again. We'll now move on to reports from some of our subcommittees. If there are reports, rules and policy. Is there any report this evening from the Rules and Policy Committee?
No, nothing to report.
Okay. How about an update from Superintendent Evaluation Committee?
No update either, Mayor.
Okay. And Budget and Property?
No update tonight.
Okay, so we will then turn to our business administrator, and she will give us the business administrator report as well as the personnel report. So Cammie, I'll turn the floor over to you. Or the screen.
So included in your packet was the fiscal 21 appropriation report. It's the monthly expenditures that we have year to date through December 31st. I'm working with the administrators and the staff to prepare the needed transfers while we monitor the spending of our budget funds, along with all of our federal COVID money we've been granted. There's a number of accounts with deficits due to increased spending needs that we experienced so far. We also have some accounts that are underspent at this time, which will assist in balancing the budget by the end of the fiscal year. We're keeping an eye on that and monitoring that daily. I do not have any gifts to report this month right now. And there were 2 warrants included in your packet for bills that were paid during the month of December. The only other thing I wanted to report on for the business side of it was I have filed the state end of year report with the Department of Education. It's pretty much a monumental task doing those this year. It seemed to be even a little bit more challenging. There is 6 schedules. It's all the revenue and expenditures that we took in for the school district for all of last year, plus the city spending, plus the capital and the debt, all the grants, all the revolving. So we have to report it for each school individually and the district as a whole. It takes about 40 hours to prepare that report, and it's more than 60 pages long to actually get it completed, but it's been uploaded. So now that's complete and done for this year at least. On the personnel report, I wanted to let you know that during the month of December, we had 4 new hires, 3 retirements, and 2 transfers for personnel.
Okay, thank you, Cami. Are there any questions for our business administrator about this evening's report? Member Seraphy Cox.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Cami, for this report. I am curious about one thing. I looked at the very bottom line, and it shows that we have used 39.7% of the funds planned. Is that about average for this time of year? How would you say that, if you can at all, forecast for the rest of the fiscal?
One thing that's very deceiving about this report is about 75 to 80% of our expenditures out of our budget are for payroll. Some of our payroll for the fiscal year starts in July for those people that work 52 weeks. And the people that work school year only, for instance, the teachers, they actually start working in September, and their payroll, most of them, but not all of them, will go through August. So it's rather deceiving because that number is not accounted for, but yet we need to pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say we're probably a little bit running a little bit over in some accounts and under in some. So I'm looking that it's a pretty good number where we are. I want the committee to really know that because it's only at 40% and we're 50% through the year, that doesn't mean we're ahead of the game. That's what the point I'm trying to make, because some of those payroll expenditures need to be made during July and August. So that's why it's not really looking that we're really 50% through the spending yet.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Does
Yeah,
that make any sense?
You got to the heart of my question.
Okay, so make sure I was clear and understood.
And I think the only other piece was, are we normally at about 40% this time of year? Or do you not necessarily have that at the top of your head?
I think, I don't have the percentage right off the top of my head, but usually what happens is we would have spent a little bit more money in some areas that we didn't because we weren't in school right away. And we haven't processed some payments, for instance, the transportation contracts and things, we're still finalizing those. So those payments aren't in here at all yet, but we've been incurring them. So it's showing that we've got more money than we really have at the moment.
I was curious about specifically the transportation. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cami.
Member Fallon.
Thanks. Cami, can you explain, so I know we're pretty far over on our legal budget that we had appropriated originally. Have we actually been billed? Like, does this include the numbers through the end of the contract negotiations we just finished, or do we expect to still receive a bill for that? I mean, is this the current amount?
This would only be through, at least for the regular legal fees. The special education I'd have to verify, but the regular legal fees, that is only through the month of November services. We haven't processed December's payment yet, so that's not reflected there. And the only thing that I do want to let you know is we were able to utilize some of our federal COVID money for some of those unanticipated negotiation costs that we needed to do because of our remote situation. Any negotiations that were dealing with that, I was able to charge to the grant rather than here. So we're still spending more. on legal costs than we had budgeted originally.
Wait, I'm sorry. So that was actually my part two of my question. So we were able to use some of the CARES Act money to pay for legal fees?
Some of them. Each
Okay.
month I would have to go through of how much we actually spent on those negotiations only for legal services that month.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Mr. Gold, Member Gold, sorry, your Zoom screen says Mr. Gold, so I was just reading it verbatim.
I'll fix that. I appreciate the question, Member Seraphicox. So I went and took a look. I don't know if you've already done it, but our first meeting of January 2020, it was 42.7%. So we had that same report from Cami from January 2020, and so it seems like it's within 3%, the reports from year to year.
Thanks.
Hey, Member Voss.
Thank you. Cami, I'm wondering if you are able to tell us anything about the CARES money and how much I don't need exact numbers, but when does it expire? Maybe it has. Have we used it all? Is there some left? Or just like sort of an overview of where that sits? And I'm assuming it's not included in this in any way, but I could be wrong.
So what you received in your packet is just our budget appropriation from the city, our regular operating budget. So any grant funds we receive are separate than that. We've had a number of grant fundings that came in related to COVID, and they're all separate grants. The CARES money was actually provided to the city, and the city gave us a portion of that money. Originally, we had to spend it by December 30th. If we didn't order the things and have the items on hand or provide the service by December 30th, we weren't allowed to use the money. And about the last week of December, that's when they extended it till next December. So Susan Wright, the finance director, and I are going through about what exactly is left out of the school's portion that she gave us to provide some services for the school department. Last count I looked at it, we were just probably about maybe $100,000 left, but I'm still trying to make sure what kind of bills came in versus what the purchase orders were, just to make sure we didn't miss anything. And for instance, like the December legal bill just came in, so I hadn't accounted for that yet. We also received, so now they've extended that till next December, but there's not a lot left on it. We also received COVID relief funds, which are also separate funds for federal, but it came through DESE, through the state. We have a little bit of that, but we've started spending some of that, again, believing it was going to expire December 30th. And we also have what they call ESSER funds. That's the grant that we also needed to share with the private schools that provide Northampton students. And that one was potentially going till June 30th, and that I have not heard of any extension. And maybe about 3 weeks ago, they announced that there's an additional COVID money for food service to help with providing some of the food services, which is just a small amount of money, but it's something to help those costs. Those are off the top of my head, the ones I can think of. They've provided some IT money. So we're going through a number of grants, and we're working on right now just putting all the expenditures through with this moving deadline target. We're trying to make sure what we actually have left, and how long do we have to spend it.
Thank you. And that's really helpful. I would appreciate at some point if you had rough numbers, you could say it now for roughly the 5 grants you just said, but just roughly what the order of magnitude is, the $10,000 level of what some of these are, like the CARES money, but it could also be another meeting or in an email. I just didn't know I had this question until I started listening to you.
Let me take a look, only because I hate to misquote wrong numbers here, because we're talking thousands and I'd rather not do that.
Sure. Thanks. Am I right to think that the CARES money was several $100,000?
Yeah.
100?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was
Approaching $1 million, actually. It was significant.
The part for the schools, though?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't have the exact number. I have it in an email I could pull up too, but yeah.
I was gonna say, I've got it on the spreadsheet here, but if I can
Oh.
exit this piece and get there.
Are there any other questions for Cami while she's pulling that up on her report? Okay.
CARES, we had 1.299570.
That was the city allotment, and then didn't you get a separate one straight from DESI that was like 300,000, or that's?
Yes, and I don't have my grant book in front of me. I know one of them was a couple 100,000. And
Yeah.
That's fine. I just wanted an order of magnitude. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Cami. And we'll now turn to our final report, and that is the superintendent report and Dr. Provost.
Thank you very much. Given the brevity of our agenda, I'm going to deliver a little bit more elaborate report than is typical. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Okay. So let me begin by saying that much of the news I'll be reporting tonight is not good, and that's difficult. But I think we've all learned to take our lumps with bad news. But I just want to say at the beginning, I'll say it at the end too, nothing that I present that's less than glowing should be construed as any kind of a criticism of our staff or our students or the decisions that have been made, as we've all had to contend with overlapping catastrophes for almost a year now. The past 11 months have brought a relentless drumbeat of disappointments, hardships, and impossible choices, and everyone is doing the best they can. Everyone should be appreciated for helping us to maintain some level of educational functionality under these difficult conditions, regardless of the results. So I'm going to start by sharing some information from the universal screening we did in the fall. As you may recall, as we're getting ready for reopening and recovery, one of the things we said is actually one of my superintendent evaluation goals is to make sure that we had an extremely robust system of universal screening in place in order to get a sense of how the shutdown may have been impacting learning. So I'm not going to go through all the data points. I'm going to focus really on one that I think tells a story that helps us get a sense of what we're dealing with, and that's fifth grade group. I'm focusing on the fifth grade group because we have really good data for 3 consecutive years for this group. So we have last year's fifth graders, and we have this year's fifth graders, and we have last year's fifth graders in sixth grade, with the exception of one school, which I'll explain in a second. So the first sad piece of news I have to share is that our universal fall screenings detected some potential evidence of possible learning loss. This chart shows the performance of last year's fifth graders on the universal screener we administer in the fall. This is the math battery for grade 5 as compared to the new fifth graders, current fifth graders. We are only able to show this comparison for 3 elementary schools because Jackson Street administered a different assessment last year as their screener. For our quick refresher on these box and whisker plots, the area within the box shows the range from the first to third quartiles, and the ends of the whisker show the maximum and minimum scores obtained by students. So for each of these data sets, the scores for the middle half of students fall within the area covered by the box. A quarter fall on the line below the box, and a quarter of students fall on the line above the box. Across the 3 schools, there's a general pattern of decreased academic performance. Now, this is a comparison of 2 different cohorts, so it's fair to question the extent to which this difference reflects the impact of the closure or the extent to which it reflects other differences between the 2 groups. So the next analysis attempts to take a look at that by looking only at the same group of students. So this shows the performance of the same group of students last fall as fifth graders and this fall as sixth graders. Again, the measure's math. And again, there's no 2019 data for Jackson Street because they administered a different screener last year. So those individuals were removed from the sixth grade data set. So this is a cohort of 127 same students moving from one year to the next. You can't compare raw scores of fifth graders to raw scores of sixth graders, but you can compare percentile ranks. And this is a chart that disappoints me because everybody knows that improving middle school math achievement, specifically sixth grade math achievement, has been a longstanding concern for our district. And I've argued that the solution needed to be systemic and would take time. I've been watching this specific cohort of students for a long time. I feel they show the impacts of many of the changes we've made to improve student achievement. And you see where they were last year as fifth graders. We had nearly 60% of the fifth graders performing among the top 25% of students nationwide. I felt that strong improvements in math achievement in this year's sixth graders were virtually guaranteed because of the strong performance we were able to build up in the students as fifth graders. But as you can see, I believe COVID is taking that all away. Our results from this fall show that they're still on track as compared to their peers, but they're no longer exceptionally high achieving in math. They are essentially average in math. Prior to COVID, I was also excited about what was happening in the subgroups. Our local testing showed that we were raising achievement and closing achievement gaps. In statewide testing, our students with disabilities and students receiving Title I support were outperforming their peers. Our Hispanic and Latino students and economically disadvantaged students were not there yet, but they were within just a couple of points of statewide averages. In this case, I've not suppressed data from Jackson Street due to the lasso testing from last year because the real concern is the size of the magnitude of the current equity gaps. And you can see that the equity gaps are opening up again. I feel like so much of the work that was done, so much of all of the effort that went into years worth of educators' work of trying to reduce achievement gaps and produce greater equity was washed away by the shutdown. So suffice it to say, fall results indicate we could be going in the wrong direction with respect to equity. In anticipation of these potential losses, we ramped up our screening procedure for this year. In prior years, we had given just portions of the Ames Web reading assessment along with some other assessments, but not the full battery. So we only have the current year's data to show for the fifth graders in reading. Two things stand out. One are that the impacts on reading don't seem to be as significant as the impacts on math, and that you see the same pattern of historically underserved groups potentially seeing larger gaps. I will note that both of these phenomena were hypothesized last year. It was suggested that math would show greater losses and that historically underserved populations would show greater losses, and it seems to be what we have. Our social emotional screening is ongoing. We're using the Social Academic Emotional Behavioral Risk Screener, also known as the SABRS. That's actually just about to be administered to students, so I don't have much to share with that. I can say that we do have some encouraging data to share based on the research that we are conducting with a group of UMass investigators who administered the brief multidimensional students' life satisfaction scale to our 8th graders. To protect the confidentiality of everyone involved in the research, I'm not going to say much about the results other than to say that our 8th graders appear to be holding up emotionally based on the results of that study. I'll also say just a thanks, a deep, heartfelt thanks to all of the support families are providing, because as I looked at the data and the responses students were making about the strength they drew from their families and the support they felt at home, it was clear to me that that's one of the things that's helping them to get through. So kudos to you, caregivers everywhere. So I'll have more information to share about our students' social emotional well-being once the SABRS is administered. So you may have seen this article from this morning's newspaper or read or heard similar reports elsewhere indicating that the pandemic is resulting in lower college applications. As you can see from this data, we're seeing fewer of our seniors completing the FAFSA process. As I learn more about this emerging issue, I understand that college applications from first generation, fee waiver eligible, and historically underrepresented students seem to be disproportionately impacted. I've asked our high school staff to examine how race and socioeconomic status may be impacting our applications and whether we're seeing not only an overall reduction, but also a potential equity gap growing there. So there are some considerations I want to put forth for trying to make sense of this data. As I stated at the outset, nothing in this presentation should be interpreted as a negation of our staff, students, or families, or of the grueling work they've done to navigate this pandemic. To the contrary, these results could easily have been much worse if it were not for the efforts of our entire school community to overcome the educational challenges posed by the pandemic. From what I know of the FAFSA data across state and other districts, the decline for post-secondary education is much more severe in many other districts. So I'm thankful that this data is as good as it is, and I'd like to thank everyone who has helped to support our students through this time. Secondly, the fall screening data could well represent worst-case scenario. The fall screenings occurred at the end of a summer break that had been elongated by the cancellation of April vacation, as well as a delayed start to this shortened academic year. It's reasonable to assume that the longer than average summer break resulted in greater than average summer learning loss. The assessment may also show the effects of several months of what has been referred to as crisis teaching and learning. We've now been able to implement a more thoughtful and organized remote learning model. We've had our most vulnerable learners in person for several months, and we've even begun the transition to hybrid learning. The winter screenings are just about to begin. We might find that we've been able to recoup some of the losses that seem to be present in this data and may have been able to start reclosing some of the achievement gaps that have opened up over the summer. Another point, we know even less about the efficacy of hybrid learning than we know about the efficacy of remote learning, which wasn't much to begin with. As long as 6-foot social distancing is required to suppress disease transmission, our only two options are remote learning and hybrid learning. Prior to the pandemic, there were at least some functioning models of remote learning and at least a limited evidence base that we could turn to for best practices and make some inferences about the results we were likely to achieve. However, hybrid learning is a completely new animal. It was a model developed through negotiation rather than any empirical evidence about how to organize learning. There are some theoretical reasons for believing it might be superior to remote learning. There are also some theoretical reasons for believing it might be inferior to remote learning. We just don't know. And then many factors are beyond our control or influence. I'd also say that many factors are unobserved. There are always so many unobserved variables in any kind of educational study. But I'll just add personally that I have found the experience with the virus to be very humbling. It has exposed the fragility of so many of our institutions and provides me with daily examples of my own fallibility. Some of these outcomes may be beyond our control. We're certainly going to redouble our efforts with our seniors, but we may just have to accept that applying for college may not have much appeal this year when recruitment can't take place, when students don't know what kind of environment they're going into next year, when they've been out of a routine of in-person instruction for months. There just may be only so much we can do. We have a vaccine, but distribution is proving difficult. We've taken every possible step to make our schools safe for students and staff, but now there are new variants out there. To sum up, we may be on track for some very poor outcomes this year, or we may be in the process of undoing years of progress in overall achievement, outcome equity, and post-secondary educational achievement. On the other hand, we may have already begun to turn the corner. We may have begun to reverse some of these trends. The winter screening data will give us a sense of whether we're back on the right track or not. And regardless of what the data shows, our options for remediating some of the problems that we find may be extremely constrained at this time. So now I want to transition to the discussion about pausing and unpausing remote learning, because so much of the concern has been around the status of schools and how much of the learning problems that students are experiencing can be attributed to the status of schools. And there's also been many questions about clarifying the decision-making process. So let me just say, at the beginning of the year, we thought we might be able to come up with a clear and defensible set of quantitative metrics. I think we were set up to believe that when the state issued its 4-color map with recommendations for district learning mode tied to the color of each local community. Then the state changed the recommendations associated with each color. Then they changed the thresholds for each of the colors, and now the colors aren't even printed on the map. Before any of this happened, we began to realize that the map wasn't going to be a reliable guide. To literally paint a whole community with one brushstroke at a time when almost all of the disease transmission was limited to congregate living settings made no sense. We realized that early on. That was one of the findings of the JLMC. We needed to have a more nuanced look at communities. As I said, the 4-color map with recommendations for district learning mode was tied to the color of the local community originally, but the state has changed its metrics several times. So obviously something tied to a simple map wasn't going to work. And then community level data can be influenced by institutional asymptomatic testing. Director O'Leary reviews our state, county, and local disease transmission data with us twice a week, in addition to her weekly meeting with the Superintendent's Advisory Committee. She always presents county data with and without higher education testing rates, because routine, repeat asymptomatic COVID-19 testing can influence the percent positivity calculation for communities such as ours. However, the limited testing at Smith College has really not impacted our percent positivity rates in Northampton so far, because of the number of students and faculty being on campus small at this time. Come spring semester, that might change. To put it simply, it's complicated. And COVID policy decisions are extremely contextual, and rough estimates of disease presence and transmission, which is what you get from the map, is not really sufficient to guide decision-making. What has emerged instead is a qualitative set of trigger points for specific actions. And I really wish, in hindsight, that I that we realized this at the time we were trying to come up with metrics and talking about percentages and different communities, percentages and colors. But the truth is we had to learn this as we went along. So this model, I think you can think of as sort of coming from the organic process of meeting several times a week to discuss the data and figure out what are the things that could cause us to be in person, or what are the things that could cause us to have to pause our in-person learning. So the first consideration is the history of human behavior in the context of the virus. This was the reason for the planned pause. We had seen that public health warnings to avoid family gatherings failed to motivate any changes in human behavior over the Thanksgiving holiday and previous holidays. We had seen spikes there. With the virus already increasing and another set of holidays coming up, we expected that many people would again engage in family gatherings, thereby further spreading the virus, and we were worried that the spread would get ahead of us, which is exactly what happened. That brings me to the second factor, which is contact tracing capacity and containment. Much more important than the overall level of virus in the city is whether we're able to investigate the transmission within our school community and quarantine potentially infected individuals. This is the reason we had to extend the pause of in-person instruction. At one point last week, and it was a point late last week, we were following 20 potential cases, and they had come to us in a very sort of rapid way. There was no way we could guarantee containment of these potential cases by Monday, which is why we extended the pause. We acknowledge the number of COVID cases within the city has increased significantly, and additionally with the vaccine rollout that the health department is supporting, the capacity for contact tracing is stretched. Therefore, we're in the process of hiring a shared contact tracer position that will work directly on school-related cases. This will be a temporary position for the next couple of months, and we will be looking to use COVID money for that. I can tell you that the activity has significantly diminished since last week. As I said, we had 20 cases pop up, or potential cases pop up, in what was effectively a 24-hour period last week, and it was late in the week. This week we've had about 10 new cases, and they've been spread out over the 4 days so far. So we're in a much different situation in terms of tracing capacity and containment right now. Another factor that could trigger an additional pause would be evidence of disease spread within the school community. Obviously, that hasn't been happening in the past 3 or 4 weeks with school closed. And to date, contact tracing has not shown any transmission taking place within the schools. The disease within our school community is spread mainly through household members and gatherings outside of school. If that were to change, and our local contact tracing identified disease spread taking place within the schools, it would be another reason to institute a pause. And again, is a reason why the map isn't a very effective measure, or sort of gross measures of disease activity within the community aren't important. You could have a small outbreak in a school, not significant enough to register a change of color on the map, but significant enough to cause a shutdown of that school, or possibly even a shutdown of the district. And then the fourth factor is impact on staffing. So even with disease containment at low or no transmission in the schools, it is possible that staff could contract the disease in another setting, requiring them to quarantine. And this could result in a pause of in-person learning on a class-by-class or school-by-school basis, depending on the number of staff in quarantine. Again, in this case, the staff, the number of staff might be not significant enough to change the color of the map for the city. But if you have an entire team of teachers at a grade level in quarantine, then you effectively can't provide education at that grade level. So these are really the four factors that I'm always talking to Meredith about, and that the Superintendent's Advisory Committee is always considering when they meet on Fridays. So the advisory group will meet tomorrow, and we'll get their recommendation. But at this time, all four factors seem favorable for the resumption of the phase into in-person learning on Tuesday for students in grades pre-K through 6. So finally, I just wanted to give an update on hybrid versus remote instruction in the middle schools. I know that this has been a question that and topic of interest. It still remains to be about 50-50 split between hybrid and remote in grade 6 and 7, and is trending more towards remote instruction in grade 8. And then finally, I want to finish with some silver linings. Not everything about the pandemic has hindered our mission. In some ways, it's helped to accelerate our process. About 3 years ago, I advised the committee that we needed to implement a standards-based grading and a new code of conduct focused on restorative practices in order to facilitate some of the equity goals we all shared. This week, I plan the final 3 training sessions to implement the code of conduct with CES and black print. That's something I wouldn't have been able to do without COVID and without the Wednesday, once a month ABAR trainings. We are also, as our student reps told us earlier tonight, preparing to issue our first standards-based report card at the high school. I thought that was going to be a massively difficult task that would take many years to achieve. At one point, we were talking about bringing standards-based grading through as a cohort over the course of 13 years, but now it's done. So that's something that I think COVID has allowed us to do. And in some ways, COVID has allowed us to hit the reset button so that we'll be able to emerge from this period with structures that are more conducive to the needs of students, and will be position us to be better able to help with the recovery process for any learning loss that persists. So I will just close with the words of a teacher who wrote us all about the implementation of the new grading system. Students started talking about their excitement about the new grading system, and so I think it's appropriate to finish with a teacher's excitement about it. So, quote, last week's department chair meeting and the subsequent plan distributed today made it apparent that our professional opinions and concerns regarding student achievement are taken seriously when decisions like this are made. I look forward to the implementation of these meaningful changes. These two things really are, I think, striking a strong blow for equity. These are things that are going to position us well for the future. And that's where I'd like to end my report for this evening.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Provost. So you've got a few hands up with questions. Member Kaufman, you had your hand up first.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Provost. That was really an incredibly important presentation. Just personally, I feel really, really confident in your decision-making ability, and I think your thoughtfulness and range of information and folks that you're putting into your decision-making process and the recommendations that you're getting from folks is very impressive. So I thank you for that tremendously. I know it's an impossible situation. I also appreciate your honesty in really talking about what phases we have gone through and the challenges and whatnot. I think people's expectations sometimes are above and beyond what they can be, but I'm very confident and really proud to have you as our leader in making these decisions.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I did have a specific question regarding the student achievement data. So I might have gotten a little bit lost there, but were you saying that maybe just summarize this. Do you think that our students are experiencing a greater learning loss than other students? And I mean other students who took the same test and may have also, and probably were also experiencing the same type of experiences due to the pandemic. Was that something, was that?
No, I would have no reason to believe that.
Yeah.
I have no data to know either way. What I can say is that compared to their performance in prior years, it appears that some students are not showing the same kind of strength and skills that they had, just as compared to themselves, not compared to anyone else.
Right. Does the state, I'm not familiar with the math battery that you're referring to. I know that others, Member Gold certainly would as well, but do they give that data in terms of state percentages or comparison to other like-minded schools, state or nation, if it's a nationwide exam or assessment? Do we have a way of seeing whether we're experiencing the same unfortunate learning loss at others or whether it's higher or lower?
I think that is going to be the topic of dissertations for years to come. Right now, people are just starting to get their data in. And I have, if there is data showing what the fall screening has looked like nationwide, I'm not aware of it.
Okay. And so in your conversations with folks at the state and obviously with other superintendents, I don't think this data is surprising. I would hope it's not surprising to anybody. It's unfortunate. We knew it was coming. I can't imagine that it wasn't expected, as depressing as it is. But has the state began to discuss solutions, extending the amount of time that students are going to spend in high school or middle school, for example, or summer school possibilities, or any sort of out-of-the-box thinking so that when our students graduate, they have the same opportunities as their friends and colleagues and peers did before them?
I have not been part of any conversations at the state level around that. One of the reasons why I was gathering this report or this information for this report is we're about to go into budget season.
Yep.
And I think what we need to do is focus resources on trying to address some of these gaps locally. I can tell you that the idea of extending learning through vacations is something that some of the principals have discussed with me. It isn't something that has gotten very far off the ground because we don't have a lot of funding for it. It may be something that we're able to do for a small group of students at the middle school. Particularly, we have turnaround grant money to help our ELs, and we may be able to provide some extended learning opportunities for them using some of that grant money.
Yeah.
But I do think solutions like that are going to be needed. I think it's going to take a long time to recoup these losses. I could be wrong. I'd really be happy to be coming back in another couple of months and showing you the midwinter screening and say, look, it's all better. That remains to be seen.
Yeah, that would be great, but I wouldn't expect it. I appreciate you thinking about some solutions, but I really hope the state could take the lead on this. And I would expect that there's going to be a lot more money for states and localities in the next wave of our federal government based on some recent announcements. So I think that's where we need to start planning for this in the future. My last question is on this part of your presentation, specifically the piece around considerations for pause. I'm wondering, because we've all been getting questions around that, is that something that you would be able to piece out that part of the video of our meeting and maybe just post that 5 to 10 minute sort of presentation so we could point out constituents towards your explanation?
Yes, this is being videotaped by Northampton Open Media. So once it's up on YouTube, I could download it and splice it and put it back on our website.
That'd be great. Thank you. So.
Okay, thank you, Member Kaufman. Member Voss has her hand up next.
Thank you. I'll be brief because I think we had similar themes, but maybe I have a little bit to add. I just wanted to echo that while it's certainly disappointing that there's learning loss, it's not unexpected. And just to really point out that it looks like we're comparing things to normal times. So that's really important because I think if you compared our entire country, you would see that trend. And maybe we're doing really, we might be doing better than many. I personally see that there's learning loss, and of course we need to support it, but our teachers are doing a really good job, and our students and families are doing a really good job, because there's still some good stuff going on there as well. So we just have to keep in mind what we're comparing it to. And then along those lines, the question comes, what do we do to help those students who are falling behind in the yellow and orange areas of those charts you showed? And I hope that maybe we can think about that. A couple ideas come to mind. Just I don't know where the money comes from, but can we find money to support some of those students who are falling behind over the summer? And in terms of students maybe not applying to college, it's really hard to apply to college when you aren't passing people in the hallway and talking about it. It's just a completely different world. It's tough. Can we maybe at the high school support those kids next year if they're not getting that this year, and just kind of extend this idea of K through 12 for kids that need a little more time because of this pandemic? So those were some thoughts on the first part. And I really appreciate all that you shared. Just like Member Kaufman said, a lot of questions we're getting in terms of pause. And again, I think you're balancing all of this really well. There's no obvious right answer. And it would be really, there's dire consequences either way. And it's really hard to know what to do ahead of time. But one thing I just want us to think about as a group is, if we were to stay paused for more, we're paying a price in terms of what we had in the fall with our highest need students not being able to go to school, a much smaller number than what we're trying to get in hybrid. And I just want to name that. And I don't know what the solution is, but it may be something we want to talk about.
I know that those are mainly thoughts rather than questions, but if I could, I would just like to follow up on a couple of those. First, your first point about everyone in this district doing the best they can is really important. I said that twice in my report, and I will keep reinforcing that. This has been the worst possible scenario for any kind of teaching and learning to take place, right? And the fact that we've moved the ball forward at all is only due to the person's work that teachers have been doing and that parents have been doing to support their kids at home, and that kids have been doing to try to learn in less than ideal conditions. So 100%, I'll say it again, I'll say it a million times. We're all doing the best we can. The second thing I wanted to respond to is the ongoing support for seniors. That was part of the function of the senior issues group. If you remember when we started the reopening committees, one of the committees was specifically dedicated to senior issues. And they did follow last year's graduates over the summer to make sure that people were able to make plans or able to make revised plans if needed. And so we will, I imagine, have an even bigger job to do of sort of aftercare with this group of seniors. I think because other seniors already had plans before COVID hit. They had a lot of things in place, and this group missed a really critical time for college enrollment. So I think that the challenge with them is bigger, and I think that's in part one of the reasons why we're seeing it. And it's what you said, you're not passing people in the halls. You're not going on college tours. You're not doing any of those things that are normally a part of a junior or senior year. So it's really hard.
Okay, the next person with their hand up is Member Levy. Member Levy, you have your hand up?
I also had a number of similar themes, so I'll try not.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me right now?
Very faintly.
Okay, hang on. Let me try this. How about now?
Slightly better.
I changed my microphone. Okay, I'm gonna turn off my video so that you don't see up my nostrils, and I'm gonna put my face really close. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about that. So I had a number of similar themes, so I won't repeat. I want to echo my gratitude for all you are doing, as well as this presentation. It was really, really helpful to see the data and to hear you talk that through. I have have a few questions, one of which might be a stupid question, but I noticed you showed various demographics, but you didn't show any results of Black students. How come?
Because the subgroup is too small to form a meaningful average. With one class, the numbers just aren't there.
Okay, thank you. Makes sense. I also had Member Voss made a statement about pausing versus returning to remote learning. And I have a little bit of a question related to that. Also thinking about our higher needs students not being able to be in person during a pause. And it's a question for you. What determines a pause versus a return to remote learning? And what might spark us to simply return to remote learning?
So a return to remote learning would require a vote by the school committee. Right now, the school committee has voted for a pause. And I can say a little bit more about why pauses are sort of applied across all instead of the former situation when we had remote learning. When a pause is called, it's because we're concerned for student safety. If we're concerned for student safety, we're concerned for all students. It doesn't matter what subgroup they belong to. So if, when I was reviewing the data last week and knowing that we didn't have containment on COVID cases within the community, bringing our high-risk kids into school, I think would be an extremely unwise, if not irresponsible thing to do. So that's the difference between a fully remote decision and a temporary pause.
Yeah, thank you. I guess for me, and that makes perfect sense for me as I'm thinking about the difference, as if we're thinking of a longer term pause, what I'm thinking about is whether having much smaller numbers in the buildings with our higher needs students might still be safe. So obviously with like this past week, it makes sense to do a pause. But if for some reason in the future we're needing to think about a longer term pause, I think it might make sense for us to think about going back to remote learning. This is a question about sort of thinking ahead. And again, I echo the sentiments that the 4-part plan or thinking about this in 4 parts really helps. I'm thinking about what it might look like in the spring as the weather is getting warmer. And given that if we're always going to have as you mentioned, the requirement for 6 feet indoors, that we're going to continue to be limited in our ability to bring back more students. And as we think about the longer term impact on their learning, it's I guess not a question as much as a hope that we can start thinking now about some creativity and some different solutions for the spring so that we can utilize outdoor spaces and get more students back with teachers and in-person learning. So it's a hope that we can start those conversations now. And then my last piece is I'm really intrigued and interested in the new report cards. And I wonder at the high school, would you be able to share a sample report card with us once they're released so that we can get a sense of what that looks like? I'd just be really curious to see that.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, Member Gold.
Thanks. How's my audio? Okay so far?
Sounds great.
Awesome. Thanks. Superintendent Provost, I appreciate the focus on student achievement and learning in your presentation. A couple questions. First, just regarding the math test. Sorry if I missed where it was in your presentation. What's the name of the assessment that's being used? I know you said the math battery, but what?
So that's through AIMSweb. The battery is actually a series of subtests that rolls up into the whole battery.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
It includes concepts and applications. It includes number sense. Includes a number of different things.
AIMSweb. Okay, cool. So it's the AIMSweb battery. Yeah. Batteries. And then So the next part is, do we know what % of students by subgroup were assessed? And I'm asking that in the sense of right before this, Department of Education had a learning in the pandemic and sharing data about student learning loss today, just the hour before that I jumped on. And something that they were sharing is that there's a lot of missing data from a lot of our high risk and most neediest students, in the sense that those students aren't even being assessed, whether it's because schools aren't able to, or the kids are not participating, or what have you. So I'm wondering, do you, and if you don't have it tonight or not, but do you know by our risk population what students are, like, are we getting 100% of our highest need students included in that testing?
So the only students that I would say are missing from this group are homeschoolers. We have had, as I think we talked about it at a prior meeting, a pretty dramatic increase in the number of homeschool applications this year. And I'm not sure how that group breaks down demographically, but of students who are attending school either in hybrid or remote, we are very close to 100%.
Gotcha. Okay, that's promising, and I appreciate knowing that. Do you then you had the comparison for grade 5 to 6, right? And
Yep.
Sorry for these questions. They probably could have been emailed, but just we didn't get this till today, and I totally understand why. I just don't want people to wonder, why am I asking potentially questions that you could have been prepared for. For grades 5 to 6, how does this compare to pre-COVID 5 to 6? And if you obviously can't pull that right now, but that'd be interesting to know, that slide that you had, right, where you're showing 5 to 6 for the 2 years, and obviously there was a big drop in 6th grade. Like, is that atypical? Like, so looking at that from 18 to 19 would give us a view of that. And maybe you know that off the top of your head somehow, magically.
Well, I know the answer, but it's that I don't know. And the reason why is because we've never done this full-scale comprehensive universal screening throughout the grades, all the grades through pre-K through 8 like we did this year. In prior years, the assessment data in 6th grade, 7th and 8th was only students with disabilities. So I can't, it's actually the opposite of what you said. In prior years, we were missing students. We were missing most of the students. This year, we have almost all the students included in the assessments.
All right, so there's no, would there be anything, I guess, even if it was our students with special needs, I mean, that would be an interesting thing. It would give us some picture of pre and post COVID, right? Like if you have the data set for the same cohorts from 19 to 20 as you do for 18 to 19, that, for a similar test, that could be informative.
Yeah, I could pull those out. I would just caution against making inferences from a specific subgroup to the performance of the whole group.
Right, yeah. But at least it would let us know for that subgroup. And it sounds like our special needs one would be a big one. In regards to the comparison, and I shared it with Annie, I don't know if you want to, I don't know if it's okay for her to put it up now, but so that on the Department of Education, they presented the comparison of reading loss to math loss on fall 19 and fall 20 map testing nationwide. And the dramatic is that, if it's cool for her to share that, it's a really interesting slide, because it shows, and this is straight from the Department of Ed, you can see on the left-hand side is reading, comparing, and the red is 19 and the green is 20. And on the right-hand side is math, the red is 19 and the green is 20. And so we're seeing a dramatic difference in the impact of COVID and learning loss that happened in the spring, specifically on math. And so I think just as we go into the budgetary season, go into staffing and things like that, a big conversation they were having, and I would hope that the data we're seeing, and as we're thinking about the budget and what we invest in, because math being cumulative in the way we learn, right? Like we're reading if you don't learn about fractions in 3rd grade, then working on fractions in 4th grade becomes nearly impossible. Like if you don't know what a fraction, where third grade is where they learned what a fraction was. Now you can't do computing with fractions in fourth had you not known what a fraction is. Where reading, you don't have that same challenge. And so the data you were sharing is quite similar to what they were sharing from the MAP test. And so I just think that it behooves us to really focus on how do we make up that, what can we do to make up that gap for the two subjects. So I did just want to share that piece.
Thank you for sharing that. That actually answers someone's question. Someone asked about what do we know about what's happening nationally. So thank you for helping me answer that.
Yeah, had the meeting not been right before this, I wouldn't have had it. So it's just a coincidental timing. If I might continue, you had said that there were a lot of things that are not in our control and that we don't have influence on, right? And that was posed a big challenge. Clearly, because we were trying to even catch up to speed in the beginning of the year, there were things that we couldn't control at all because of that, but not because we don't have control over it, if you know what I mean. I'm wondering, what is it now is there anything now that you're thinking like we weren't controlling that, but now we can, since we're into the mid-year and we have a little bit better idea of how instruction is progressing? You know what I mean? Like since we're not doing, hopefully, I mean, I haven't seen the part of it, but as intense negotiating going on, and we don't have as much planning with the schools on the models going on. And like, is there something that you're now looking forward to be able to control now, hopefully that you have more time on? I'm wondering, like, that would be helpful to know about?
Sure. And I would say that this is the work of the entire district, not just my work. But one of the things that gives me hope is that we have the information that we just shared, right? I've seen what some of the school psychologists are doing with the data at a much more fine-grained level. The reason that I look at this is to get large patterns and to start making some inferences about where we should invest resources, but what teachers can do with it. And this is why the testing is important. It's not to make charts. It's to identify what the learning gaps are and start working on remediating them. So in the fall, it was a big question mark. We didn't know. Now we know, right? And not that testing is the only way you can find that out. Obviously, teachers are doing diagnostic teaching all the time and they find out gaps, but it is an efficient way to find out what are some of the things that are impacting large groups of learners across the district that can guide us to decisions about where we want to adjust curriculum for the second half of the year.
I appreciate you saying that, because a big part, and I think one of the things that we can control is the depth of our assessing, right? Like in what we're assessing. And I know we all, and I included, want to invest so much into the social emotional needs of our students. But one of the things from the Department of Ed's presentation was now more than ever, we need to assess student learning. Like we need to really understand and know to the granular level of subgroup data, what is going on with our kids. And so I would hope that, without a big impact on students, we figure out a way, and teachers, we figure out a way to assess student achievement. Very soon again, like I know you did in the fall. I hope there's something coming up for the winter and for the spring and towards the end, like even if it's just parts of standards and domains, but the more data we get on student achievement, the better we'll be able to differentiate come potentially the next year or whenever the future we have. And so, yeah, I really hope that we find a way to positively frame assessing moving forward with that. I promise my last thing would be regarding the whole closure and when to open and pausing and what have you. I definitely appreciate and get how we were trying to use the state's information initially as guidance, and we're thinking, hey, if we use their map and we do this and we do this, and we'll maybe come up with a good answer. And as we were going, we were realizing that wasn't working. And sounds like now you have that 4 frames or 4 points. I would just hope, because I know there definitely were, even back in August and over the summer, there were feelings that maybe the state's maps weren't what we needed in Northampton, right? Like the suggestion that we should just rely, there was other suggestions that we shouldn't just rely on the state's map back then, right? And Understandably, we didn't heed those suggestions as strongly as maybe we should have. But I would just hope that moving forward, we really continue to do whatever we think is right by Northampton and not necessarily rely on the state to present those answers. So I would just encourage us to keep that in mind, that, you know, we might hear statewide and nationwide ideas and concerns, but and data, but really we need to be as local as possible for the needs of our students. So I'll leave that at that.
Thank you, Member Gold. Member Fallon, you have your hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, I just had a quick question. Dr. Provost, are the assessments offered normally, like the 2019 assessments, were those offered online?
Yes. Well, I should say I believe they were. We had purchased the online component as of last year, and I believe that's how most of them were administered. I didn't actually observe it. This year I was able to observe the administration, and it was online. And Molly's giving me the thumbs up, so I guess that means we did do it online last year too.
Okay, because that was a portion of it that I was going to ask about, because I feel like if we're comparing the scores, I know that when we go to online standardized testing, there's that online penalty, and that the scores tend to lag. And they've done studies that show like it's as if students lost months and months of learning, even though it's the same student taking the same standardized test. It's just going from paper to online. And I wonder if there's, and that loss is always significantly greater for students from low-income families and English language learners and students with disabilities, and that they're disproportionately harmed by that switch. And I do wonder how much of this is our students being disproportionately harmed by the remote environment that they were taking this assessment under. And so that's the only point I kind of wanted to make is, you know, I would be interested if you could provide us with similar data after they've been in the remote environment and are more familiar with it, if you know, when they redo this assessments, or if the assessments are administered in the spring in person, because I feel like that actually would be more helpful for us to compare in some ways.
I sure will. That's the plan.
Thanks.
Okay, Member Voss.
Thanks. I realized I have one more question, and thanks, Member Gold, you made me realize I had it. So I think another thing in terms of just the COVID spread in Northampton and what's happened since we voted to go hybrid in November, the numbers have changed dramatically. And I think that's important to recognize. And my question is, how, both as school committee members or as parents or anyone else involved in this, how do we understand what those local numbers look like? So for example, I really appreciate you sharing the process and how you get feedback twice a week and you have this meeting on Fridays. And I really support looking at the 4 things you listed, Dr. Provost, but I also wonder if there's a way for that information to become more transparent to us and to the community. So we know, I don't think everybody looks at the numbers all that much. And I think I haven't fully seen them yet, but it came out today. And I would guess we're at least 30 cases per 100,000 over a 14-day average. And it seems to me that it's going up. So 14-day average isn't reflecting what it really is now. Maybe I'm wrong on some of that, but I'm probably pretty close. That's really different from what we were dealing with in the fall. And at some point it becomes, as somebody else already said, more dangerous to have more people on top of each other. And I'm not trying to make the decision or say that you should have a number to make that decision. I understand that it takes understanding the cases and contact tracing them. But I also feel like it would be really helpful for people to understand what those numbers are so they can make good decisions for themselves in terms of what they're doing.
I have heard the concerns about transparency as well. And so what I've done is developed a sort of skeletal communication for the advisory committee to consider posting on a weekly basis. it basically looks at some of these factors and then has blanks to fill in of this is what it looks like this week with respect to cases and containment and things like that. So they haven't done that since I actually came up with this idea, because we've been in the planned pause and then the extended pause, so they haven't actually been meeting, but I do believe that we'll be discussing it tomorrow. And then if that makes sense, we get agreement on that, then that could be something that we just post on a weekly basis in the COVID tab so that people can have sort of an ongoing record of what the rationale for the decisions were.
Thank you. I think that'd be really helpful.
Okay, and I would just point out that the health department posts the city COVID data every week as well on its website. So that data, as well as statewide data, is always accessible on an ongoing basis. Okay, so thank you very much for your extended report and obviously the extended discussion that it elicited. The item 6 on our agenda is old business. We do not have any old business. So we move to item 7 on the agenda, new business. There was a scheduled vote on the 2021 school committee schedule, but we're going to bring that to you at your next meeting. There was a bit of a glitch with getting that out, so it wasn't included in the packet. And so we'll move to item B, which is NEF additional endowment funds and a requested vote on that. Cami, could you just give us an explanation so I could have someone make a motion just to understand what it is first?
Dr. Provost, I don't know if you have the information about NEF. I know it came in late.
I don't have it with me. Sorry.
Let me take a look. I know Annie told me about it.
It is in the file. It's in the shared file. I can bring it up.
Obviously, we voted at our last meeting to accept endowment funds. Marty Wall was here to present.
Right. And I believe he sent notice that there was one more amount that was going to be forwarded to us. And I'm just trying to put my hands on the amount so I could tell you what it's for.
Okay. All right.
I had calculated the amount, but I didn't put it in the agenda because I thought you'd take a look at it. There's many different amounts here and they add up.
Okay. So I'm assuming this was supposed to be an amendment to what we accepted at the last meeting, or in addition to what we accepted the last meeting.
Correct. There's one additional program they funded, and I'm just trying to put my hands on which one it was because they sent in notice.
Okay. Well, those all look familiar.
Which one was that, Cami? I might be able to find it.
It was either from Friday or Monday this week, Monday or Tuesday this week it came through. And it was from NEF.
Do you know which program specifically?
No, that's what I'm looking for.
Okay. Well, if you'd like, well, actually, that's not going to work.
No. Oh, come on. Sure, it's okay. Go ahead.
Well, we can come back to this while you're looking for it.
Yeah, if you want to do the next item, I'll find it and come.
Sure. Okay, so we'll go on to the next item and come back. So this next item is an update and discussion on the business administrator search. As obviously school committee members know, and all team members know, and other staff know, Ms. Lamica has rescinded her lifetime appointment to be our business manager. She's retiring. And so we unfortunately have to begin the search. And so I was in communication with the school committee in terms of providing her letter indicating her retirement, and we agreed to put the item on this month's agenda, and the superintendent has posted the job, and I'll turn it over to the superintendent to give an update.
Thank you. And now the public knows too. So I would just add that due to the many demands of planning and negotiation surrounding the COVID-19 period, Cami has taken very little vacation time over the past year. As a result, she has more than 40 vacation days to take over the next 5 months. She's committed to seeing the FY22 budget process through, so I expect she'll be taking large chunks of that time in May and June. And so knowing that whoever will take her place will also have notice obligations to their current employer, I think it's important for the school committee to appoint a successor no later than March. This is one of the positions that's appointed directly by the committee. So my goal would be to bring you a recommended candidate or candidates either at the regular March meeting or at a special meeting to be held in March. To start the process, we posted the position at the end of last month with a regionally competitive salary of 120 to 130,000. This put us in the same range of districts such as Gardner, which is one that the MASC used as a comparator to Northampton when they gave the school committee the training on the budget. Hampden-Wilbraham, Agawam, Greenfield, and the Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative, all sorts of mid-sized districts and not in the metro zone. It would also be comparable to the salary range of Cami. So I've formed a diverse search committee with representatives from many of the departments that interface with the business administrator. It includes Rebecca Bazansky as chair of the Budget and Property Subcommittee, Wendy Blanchette, Tammy Lieber, Tony Kuzniers, Mistel Hanna, Vimari Bermudez, Maria Vega, Beth Chiquette, and Glenda Stoddard. I'll just add that this will be the third time in my 7 years in the district that I'm involved with conducting a search for a school business administrator. And like every administrative position from principal on up, there's a shortage of school business administrators. In our first search, there was only one truly viable candidate. The second time we went out for a business administrator, there were 2 excellent candidates. But as I said, this is a shortage area, and we ended up losing a bidding war with Greenfield for the person we picked, which I'll just say is one of the best things that ever happened to us, because that's what led Cami to our doorstep. The upshot of all this is we need to move quickly, not only because May will be here before we know it, but also because there are too many districts chasing too few candidates in this very highly specialized field.
Okay, so the job's posted, and you've obviously put together a screening committee. So the goal would be to go through that process and screen candidates, and then make some recommendations for the school committee to consider, and hopefully in March be able to make an offer to someone and enter contract negotiations.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any questions or concerns or about that process? Okay. Well, thank you, Superintendent, for the update. And now,
got a hand, Mr. Mayor.
oh, I'm sorry. Oh, Member Seraphy Cox. My apologies.
Yes, no worries. It was mostly a procedural question. You mentioned enter contract negotiations with a potential candidate. Am I correct to assume there's a negotiating subcommittee that would enter into those negotiations? Or is it the full school committee? How does it work is my question.
It's the full school committee that is making those negotiations. So similarly to the superintendent or to the special education director, it would be the full school committee. So we would discuss in executive session and even do negotiations if needed in executive session. So that's typically how it happens. Yeah.
Mhm.
The negotiation subcommittee is primarily just collective bargaining.
Okay, good to know. And would there be like a potential proposal that would be brought to the school committee, and then we would either approve or make changes to that potential proposal?
That's generally how it's happened.
Okay.
We may proffer something, or the applicant may proffer something, or we, and generally, again, sometimes there's actual face-to-face negotiations in executive session over some of those items or issues. I know that happened in our previous, I was involved obviously in the 2 prior ones with the superintendent. And you may recall more recently when we did the contract around the special education director, there were some specific items in the contract that we discussed in executive session. So yeah, that's how it would essentially happen.
Okay.
And I'm assuming that the school MASBO or somebody probably has a standard contract, and so that they will offer, and then we'll have a contract from the MASS version of the contract. So, and then we'll duke it out to get a contract in the middle.
Thanks.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay. So turning back to you, Cami, were you able to locate that endowment amount?
I'm sorry to say, I have not put my hands on that document that has come through yet. And I know I saw it earlier this week.
Okay, well.
I'm sorry. I know they sent it, and I don't know it was an additional
Given
amount.
the fact that the school committee has never in the history of time turned down an NEF grant award, I don't think it's controversial. So we could either take a vote to say we accept the additional grant, or we could wait until the next meeting until we have it clarified. I don't think it's controversial. So we'll keep moving on with the agenda, and if it somehow pops back up, let me know. We have one more item of new business before we move to executive session. So if you find it, put your hand up and we'll get it in there. So let's move now to the
Mayor?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Can I ask, and sorry, this is obvious. Are we looking for the list that's the second part of the letter that Annie put up? Because there was 2 sets of grants on the list that she put up. And sorry, that's not it. But she put up a sheet that showed a list of grants and then the additional grants.
Yeah, Annie, I'm not sure which one of those you were sharing.
I'll share it again.
Well, no, I didn't want you to share. I just was wondering, was that what was presented to us by NEF in asking for the change or the amendment?
That is the document I got from them.
Okay. And was there an email that said we added the, art grant, or we added the, because I don't, without comparing the one we had last time, I don't know which one, what's the new grant?
That's the only document, and there was an email on the 12th. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's a different one. That's soliciting proposals. I can't put my finger on exactly where that came from. I gotta give me a couple of minutes, but that is the only document I received for this.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't we move on, have the vice chair has item D, and if somebody identifies it, give me a holler, and if not, we'll take it up at the next meeting. Okay, so this is an update on school committee retreat topics from Vice Chair Member Kaufman.
Thank you. So I wanted to share a couple of quick things before reviewing the results of the survey that you all responded to, asking for your preferred topics of interest. So just again, as a reminder, why do we do these? Why do school committees do retreats? I found a nice summary statement that says, with a clear focus, a retreat can be an opportunity to innovate, to see new possibilities, and envision the school committee's work in new and refreshing ways. A retreat can be an opportunity for taking stock, reflecting together, assessing and refining our practice, and reinvigorating at specific aspects of our work. So while I think that retreats can be viewed as professional development, they aren't necessarily what many of us are more or less used to, such as attending a conference or a training or a workshop and the like, although they certainly can be. And the reason I mention this, and I'm not sure if you all know this, but we have in the past, and I think we, just looking at the budget that Cami reviewed with us earlier on, we have set aside money for school committee members to attend events, trainings, conferences, similar activities like the one that Member Gold just referred to, with the intention that they would return valuable information to share with the rest of the school committee after they attended this event. I know Member Fallon has done this in the past. I think we've paid for people's registration fees or travel or whatnot. Some people have been offered that and they've turned it down. But if your desired topic area is not the one that we select for our retreat, I bring this up because you still may be able to attend a related event that you might hear about, as long as you think it might be beneficial to the committee's work. Also related to this, as you know, we have these quarterly student success meetings. You'll see them reflected on the calendar at our next meeting, but these are 4 meetings that are scheduled throughout the year, although we haven't had one for a while. But 2 of these are scheduled already next fall. One's related to the MCAS and the other is related to the school improvement plans. 2 are not decided yet, but in the past we have done one on school and district accountability, which is what one of the members had discussed as a possibility for the retreat. And like I said, one's related to MCAS, but there was also, as you'll see in a second, 2 members that wanted to do a retreat on MCAS. And once again, I'm just bringing this up because if it doesn't get selected for the retreat, there are other opportunities that might fit more naturally into what we already have scheduled. So finally, thank you all for your responses. There's lots of great data, lots of great ideas that were brought up. And what I want to do is just ask, I think I sent it to you, Laura, didn't I? I mean, Annie, sorry.
Yeah, you did send it to me. Would you like me to share it?
Yeah. If you can share that and maybe just take 1 minute to look at the results quietly. And I'll kind of discuss what I think is pretty clear in terms of what the overall most popular item is or items to discuss. But why doesn't everybody just take a look now? And I asked for a first choice, then I asked for others. So people did both. MASC has a list of workshops that they facilitate. So that was part of the list that I sent out. Some of you, but not all of you, selected from that list. But it is a possibility if we go with any of these that we might have some built-in expertise and experience in facilitating workshops or more so retreats around these areas. So I'll just throw it out there. From what I see, there's one area that gained the most interest, and that's effective meetings and teamwork. And I think, you know, to the extent that I could look at other comments, I think it doesn't come as a surprise maybe to any of us that meetings until late at night or early the next morning is not conducive towards good, effective decision-making. And we've been having many, many meetings, and there's a desire, I think, on many people's part to not only have more effective meetings, but maybe more efficient, and those are probably related. So it seems like effective meetings and teamwork rose to the top. I think related to that, there's a topic having to do with evaluating the committee's work, which is perhaps more about the question of, is the committee effectively carrying out its work? And can we do more to be more efficient? So this is just the next retreat. We're supposed to have 2 a year. I'm just trying to find out if there's general consensus. And from there, I would move on to hiring, if necessary, a facilitator and coming up with a date. But I just wanted to throw out at this point the question of, how do you feel about the focus of our retreat being on this sort of theme of making our meetings more effective and more efficient? And in general, looking for a yay or nay. And if that's the case, if there's any other specifics that you think would be helpful for me to recruit and put together an effective retreat for us, please share. Member Go.
Yeah, thanks. You were just there was one of my questions. Is there a time frame or when we're thinking of having this? I'm sorry if you said it initially.
I did not send that. We just got through so many meetings, and then we had this sort of natural break. And I can tell you that when budget season hits, we're going to be really busy again. So I'll just take it upon myself to throw out some prospective dates. But if you have any ideas, please, in terms of just general weeks or months, please let me know.
Well, I guess I'm asking that in terms of what.
We don't have it scheduled yet.
Right. No, I guess what I mean is, like, potentially when we have this and what is learned potentially could not be carried over to the next school committee. So I think, like, how do we create, you know what I mean? Like, for all we know, there could be 10 new people come January 2022, And so I guess, how do we leverage a retreat for ongoing long-term school committee gains rather than just short term for the 10 of us or 9, So I don't know. That's just what's jumping out at me.
Right. Well, I think that's an important question for almost any retreat. So if in effect we decide, let's say we decide to go with effective meetings, maybe one of the outcomes of that would be handouts or an agreement or some sort of, here's the main things that we need to abide by for an effective meeting. I'm just throwing that out there. So that could be passed along in the future, but certainly as a part of the retreat itself, that might be a key question to reflect on regardless of whatever the topic is.
Yeah, that's sort of is that we should be deciding on something not for us individually, but for what we see at how the Northampton School Committee is functioning for the community. That's more what I think. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm a little lost at seeing whose hands are raised.
Member Voss. Member Voss has her hand up next.
Okay.
Thanks. And thanks for sharing this with us, Lonnie, and putting it together. I guess I just wanted to advocate, there's ideas on there that I hadn't thought of. And maybe others fit into that bucket. And I'll just put out there, I didn't put this down, but I would prefer ABAR training. Having sat all fall through meeting after meeting on all sorts of subcommittees, I feel like that would be a more productive meeting than how to have a meeting right now. For me, that personalities in groups doing meetings on Zoom is really different than in person. And I'm just not sure that from my perspective, that's a helpful thing right now. If others outvote me, that's totally fine. I'll come, but just wanted to put out that just because ABAR only has 2, I would switch mine over to that. And I wonder if we might just have sort of a straw of hand raises over some of the topics.
Well, I would push back and say we already have a straw over the topics, and that's why I did the survey, but I appreciate the fact that you've changed your vote. I could see where that fits in, but why don't we hear what other folks have to say?
Levy?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I guess to echo Member Voss's point, I think what she was saying, Member Kaufman, is that some people put in options that didn't occur to other people. So the straw vote would allow people to maybe vote for something that they hadn't thought of between a few options. So like if we
Yeah.
said
Yeah.
one versus the other, how many, it just sort of seconding that. I'm
Yeah.
going to say this, and I mean it really respectfully, and I don't mean it in terms of any judgment on people who facilitate meetings, but I do think that we could use something on effective meetings. I also wonder if that, I guess I'm wondering if that needs to be a full retreat of all of the school committee members, or if that could be something that is attended by a few people who tend to be the facilitators of meetings, and they could then share with the school committee, here's what we're going to do moving forward. I guess I'm just thinking about what would be the best way to spend the time of all of us together. So I also second Member Voss's idea of ABAR training, as I think it's something that it's a direction that a number of folks in the district leadership are interested in going. It's going to absolutely come up in our the district improvement plan. And I think it would also allow us as a committee to think about what it means to do our work, not just to understand ABAR, but to do our work through that lens. So I would put a vote in for that.
Thank you.
Member Goldman.
Thank you. My comments align with Member Levy and Member Voss's comments. I also believe that in order for our work to carry forward, and something that we talked about at our last retreat, this time of year, last time, was aligning, making sure we're aligning our budget decisions with our district and our district schools and our superintendent schools, that our goals are only actualized by focusing our funding to meet them. And so I'd be interested in us having retreats that sort of align with that. Speaking of that, I think that some of our goals are focused around ABAR issues and serving various, how do we best serve different populations? And I think the ABAR training would go a long way toward that. Also, I personally would very much appreciate ABAR training, particularly because so many of the leaders and educators and staff in our district have gone through ABAR training, and I'd be really happy to feel connected with our community by having similar, comparable sort of training, so that I can be a part of a common understanding and dialogue with everyone in the district. Also, you would guess I'm the first one to want us to do a school committee self-evaluation and efficient meetings and teamwork. You know, that's what my favorite stuff. But I do know that, and along those lines, a handbook for school committee members is coming down the line at some point, and that might be it might be nice to have that to launch from in putting together what it means for us to, like guidelines about and expectations and standards for us as a committee. Might be nice to start with that handbook and go from there in talking about, so that we can have written document and information to pass forward to a future school committee. So I would propose moving that past and sticking with the ABAR training at all also.
Right.
Thank you.
So thank you for that, member. Sorry, I was going to call you Kai or Member Goldman. Thank you for that. And so you're saying that you're switching yours to ABAR. I'm just trying to get I'm trying to get to a consensus. So I can put together something and tackle it. So these are all good ideas, but my goal would be to leave this meeting with at least the majority of us feeling like there's something that we can get excited about. So any other comments?
Member Condon has his hand up next.
Thank you. Yeah. So I voted this way, and I just want to reiterate my support for working on holding effective meetings. I think it's a fundamental skill that we as a committee have failed to develop, and it has repercussions across all of our work. I think it is a skill that if we work on, it will reap benefits across ABAR and all of these other topics that we hold of value. I think it's such an essential skill that, again, without it, we're going to struggle as we have all year. But with it, I think we're going to see better gains across all of these other topics, which I completely agree are important. But we need to start at the first step, and I don't think we've mastered that first step yet.
Member Gold, you have your hand up.
Yeah, and I just, along the lines of what the date of the retreat, like, I mean, we're talking about a couple hours here, right? Like, I guess I would, like, I guess I would wonder what is the best use of a couple hours? Like, as much as I do want us to do ABAR training or even MCAS or all of these things, like, what is the best bang for our buck in a couple hours, really? Because I wouldn't want us to miss that opportunity to leverage that and try something that's too big for that time frame.
What is your idea for that? Do you have one? For a topic?
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, I think, and I mean, Member Goldman said that there's a manual coming up. I mean, I don't know. I don't. Is there one actually in development that I wasn't aware of? Because I feel like in a couple hours, that's something that could be really helpful. The manual, she was saying, for like school committee folks are coming on. I don't know. I feel like that's something that could be developed in a couple hours. I do think that, effective meetings really could in a couple hours. I don't know. I've never sat through a couple hour ABAR training that I think was effective. I mean, the one that I did in Springfield was multiple days for full day sessions. I mean, like 6, it was lots of hours. So I just can't imagine what we would do unless Member Levy thinks there's something that we could do in 3 hours. If you did, that's great. But if I'm not sure what we could do in 3 hours on that topic, where I do think the manual or effective meetings, we could actually say like some things on, or MCAS, but no one wants that. So I don't want to do that.
Member Goldman.
Thank you. I just want to point out the timing. Thank you, Member Gold, for mention the timing of the first retreat. If it were possible for it to happen in this first quarter or in the next couple months. We are at the beginning of and will be in budget season. And so I wonder if just to consider that some of these topics might be more appropriate to have training in before the budget season, where we could have another retreat later in the year after the budget's been set. So it can have an influence on the budget if the first retreat comes before the budget's set. Thank you.
Cami?
I found the NEF information when you're ready for it.
Okay, great. Okay.
So I'm going to, not seeing any other hands up, I'm going to take a leap here and say that the two top categories seem to be some aspect of effective meetings and some aspect of ABAR. And how about if we do one, what if we do both? I'll throw out the idea we do one next time and we do the other one the following time. And if people are okay with that, and maybe I can just ask for a quick head count on which one people would prefer to do next. How does that idea sound? Which one to do first, I should say, sorry. I see a member Sarah Cox's head nodding. She likes that idea. Okay, so the question is, I mean, if you really want to push back just for that general idea of doing these two topic areas the next time, please do so.
I'll just ask Member Kaufman, you did say in your initial thing, there is another opportunity to look at state data and MCAS, because I know that Superintendent's Provost's whole presentation tonight was compelling as to why student achievement we really need to wrap our heads around. So you do trust that there'll be another, because now if you're opening up for two, if we're talking about 2 retreats now, I would want to advocate for one of those being on student achievement.
My point with that, the example I was giving is that we have 4 quarterly meetings throughout the year on student achievement. One is on MCAS, but in the past, we've just discussed results. We haven't discussed fully about some of the other things that people want to talk about. Another one has been on school and district accountability. In the past, we've done that in the spring. So that might be coming up, but I think the opportunity to decide on that topic would be at next month's meeting when we approve the calendar, because you'll see on the calendar that there's 2 student success meetings scheduled for the spring, topic to be determined. That was what I was suggesting. They're kind of already on there, so to speak. So thank you. All right, so I will ask for hands raised for those that would want to begin the next meeting topic to be effective meetings. And then I'll ask which one would, how many of you would want our first retreat to be on ABAR? So raise your hand, please, if you would want our first meeting to be on the theme or topic area related to effective meetings. I see 4, and how many would want on ABAR? I'm going to put myself in for effective meetings as well, sorry. 5. And ABAR, I see 5. Who's the
And
parliamentarian?
perhaps a coin flip.
Wait, can I just raise a point that depending on who you want to get to be a speaker for the ABAR training, you might need more lead time to get someone booked than you would to just get someone from the MASC to get to come do the effective meeting. So I don't know how soon you wanted to plan the ABAR training, but I don't know if that would factor into your decision if you were planning on getting someone from the collaborative versus someone that might be further afield.
Good point.
Yeah, could I just offer a suggestion that you start planning some dates and then come back to us with what the availability is? Clearly, there's interest from the committee for both of these topics.
I can certainly plan dates, but dates, you don't want to break the tie? I was going to ask you as the parliamentarian for any ideas on how to break a tie.
Well, what is the tie? Is it a 5-5 or 5-4? I thought you said it was 5-4.
5-5.
It's 5-5.
5-5.
So that was why I was going along with what Member Fallon was suggesting, which is basically that we don't know when folks are available. So just plan both of them and see what dates, like offer both dates and see, you know, the folks that you're planning with, the dates that they are available.
Okay, is that workable, Member Kaufman?
Not particularly, no. I like the idea, but I don't see that materializing too well with too many open ends to this. If you trust me in scheduling dates and finding people and making a decision around that, that's in the best interest of the other variables, then I'm happy to do that. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes. I mean, presuming that you are going to check with the school committee members to make sure that they're available on those dates. But yes,
sure.
As long as we're available on those dates, that makes sense.
No, I can pick dates, but in terms of deciding which one goes first, I'm gonna just use my best judgment in terms of the variables or the considerations that Member Fallon brought up, as well as people might change their mind or what have you. Is that what you mean?
That's correct.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay.
That's what I'll do.
So let's hop back up to item B and take that vote on the additional NEF endowment funds. Cammie?
So when I took a look at the letter that they sent us this month and compared it to last month, what they've done is they've added 2 programs that were not on last month. I don't know if you recall, but the preschool, they had taken off because the preschool had withdrawn it during December for their $12,000 a month. $12,000 amount. And so in this letter, the NEF is giving us, they're awarding 2 other projects that they hadn't awarded last month. And that would include the collaboration for music and poetry for $10,000 and the art post at JFK for $5,000 are the 2 grants they're funding.
I would entertain a motion to accept those gifts
To accept those gifts, and so moved.
Second.
Okay, so a motion's been made, seconded, thirded, and now let's take a vote. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Member Levy,
Yes.
Member Kaufman,
Yes.
Member Goldman,
Yes.
Member Voss,
Yes.
Member Gold,
Yes.
Mayor Narcoitz,
Yes.
Member Busansky,
Yes.
Member Fallon,
Yes.
Member Seraphy Cox,
Yes.
Member Condon.
Yes.
10 in favor.
Okay, so that passes, and I believe that completes our new business for this evening. There are no discussion topics that were put forward for section 8. We have several future business and meeting dates, all of which will be held via Zoom until further notice. We have the joint City Council School Committee meeting on Thursday, January 28th, 2021. That's the official kickoff of the FY 2022 budget season process. We have a Student Advisory Committee meeting on Thursday, February 11th at 6:15, followed by the regular school committee meeting Thursday, February 11th at 6:45. And then we have a second regular school committee meeting Thursday, February 25th at 6:45. The next item, the final item on the agenda is a
Mayor,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is there, I didn't see, and I haven't heard of our next budget and property subcommittee meeting. Is there any information on that? Does anyone have any info on that?
I
know when
don't
that
know
is.
if it was
Sorry.
scheduled as a press time, but not
No?
sure,
Okay.
Andy, if you have
No
news
problem.
on that.
Well, the chair and I are going to be discussing, we're going to be talking tomorrow so we can discuss how to schedule that for the next couple of weeks.
Okay, appreciate it. Just didn't want to miss it if I was already supposed to know it.
Okay. All right.
It
So
hasn't been scheduled yet. The budget, as the superintendent said before, the budget's been delayed. The process has been delayed, so it hasn't been time to meet yet. You would know.
okay. So the final item on the agenda is an executive session, and I would ask a member to make the motion to enter executive session. Any members willing to make that motion?
Sure, I can make a motion.
Okay, I'm sorry, Member Goldman, you had your hand up, or?
I was just gonna, go ahead, Member
Go
Voss.
for it.
Sure, okay. I move to enter executive session under Massachusetts General Law, Open Meeting, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to hold grievance hearing, whereas an open session would have a detrimental effect on the school committee's negotiating position or the chair so declares.
Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
Okay, so a motion has been made and seconded to enter executive session. I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Sorry, calling the roll and on mute. Member Kaufman,
Yes.
Member Goldman,
Yes.
Member Voss,
Yes.
Member Gold,
Yes.
Mayor Narcoitz,
Yes.
Member Busansky,
Yes.
Member Fallon,
Yes.
Member Seraphy Cox,
Yes.
Member Condon,
Yes.
and Member Levy.
Yes.
Vote is 10 in favor.
Okay, so the school committee will now enter into an executive session because to hold these proceedings in open session would be detrimental on our negotiating position. And we will not return to open session. So we will adjourn directly from the executive session. So at this point, I would need to ask our friends at Northampton Open Media to conclude the broadcast and recording of the meeting. And I would ask any members of the public who are not any members of the public to please leave the meeting at this point. Obviously, we'll have members of NACE who will be joining us as part of this, but we would ask anyone else to please leave the meeting. And I see, so we'll just take a moment, a pause here while we close out the recording and Northampton Open Media is able to leave the meeting. Okay.
Can I take this moment to tell Susan that her puppy is beautiful?
Cute. Very cute.
She is a very sweet puppy. This is Zola, everybody. That's her like classic slow noise after she wakes up from a nap.
So I'm still showing the Northampton Open Media stream, and I'm still showing Northampton Open Media. So I don't know if that's just an echo effect or
Mr. Mayor, you can also, whoever's the owner of this meeting should be able to, if you click on the participants, kick anyone who doesn't belong back into the waiting room.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. It may be that they just set it on autopilot and stepped away. So I'll just put them in the